My name is Bill Skeen. I play the violoncello, or the Baroque violoncello. Back in the 18th century, it was just called the violoncello. Nowadays, we use the term Baroque to imply that it's not like its modern counterpart, which you see in the symphony orchestra. And this is my cello from the 17th century, from about 1680. In Philharmonia, we use period instruments because that is what was used in the 17th and 18th century. And the Baroque instruments have maybe a quieter sound, but they have a larger dynamic range. On a modern instrument, your bass dynamic is pretty high already. They cannot play as softly as we can play. They can play far louder, but that dynamic range is pretty small. And we can play within one note. We can play from a very soft point to a very loud point and come back very quickly. So. That sort of ability to swell on a note is unique to these Baroque instruments. The Baroque cello differs from the modern style cello, which you'll see in a modern symphony orchestra in a few ways. On a Baroque cello, there's no end pin. And the end pin was an adaptation on the modern cello to help you hold it up. So it's a prop on the floor that holds the instrument for you. It's also kind of constraining, too. So I like the freedom of not having the end pin, so I can move more. I can have my instrument move forward and backward and side to side. Another difference is, of course, the type of string we use, which is made of sheep's intestines, sheep's gut, as opposed to steel. You'll also notice some features on the outside like fingerboard, which is where we place our fingers to make the different pitches. And this is much shorter than on a modern instrument. On a modern instrument, it might end about here, and here we have about 3 inches less. This is probably because they didn't really use pitches that high till the early 19th century. Some smaller details that you might notice, that the bridge is shorter on these instruments, and the spacing between the strings, at least on a Baroque cello, is a little wider than on a modern cello. And this helps the gut strings to vibrate more freely, and that helps us get a wider dynamic range. So you may notice that in this cello, as opposed to a modern instrument, a modern cello, there are only 4 strings. This one has 5. It has the normal 4 strings as a cello, a modern cello, which is the C, the G, the D, the A. In addition, there's a high E string. So this is a very rare instrument to see from the period. You can have a replica of a 5-string made, but you rarely ever see an original one like this. You'll notice that in this case, the actual body is a little smaller than a modern cello. You might say, as opposed to a full size, which would be 8/8, it's 7/8 in size. It's a little smaller. That's not always the case. Sometimes Baroque cellos were much larger than their modern counterparts. Often, but not in this case, you'll see the peg box, which is where the pegs stick out for tuning. You'll see a peg box with an actual carved head on it. Sometimes a lion's head, sometimes an actual person's head, maybe a royalty, a member of royalty will have their head carved there. And then there are some subtle differences on the inside of the instrument too, which I can't show you here, but including a little less of the pieces of wood to help the vibration. So.